Hi, I'm Dr. Wordperson, and today we're going to talk about how India came to have such a huge number of different languages. India is one of the most linguistically diverse countries in the world, with 22 scheduled languages, basically official languages, and 447 languages total, according to Ethnologue. 447! I'm a linguist, so I can say with confidence that that is a lot of languages. How did India come to have so many different languages, you ask? Well, geography and time. Notice how there are a whole lot of big mountain ranges blocking all of the land routes into India? Well, if you have a few major language families and they sit there unmolested for thousands of years, you will get lots of languages. So, let's go over the language history of India. Let's start with the Dravidian language family. Of all the language families I'm going to discuss, this is the one that has been in India the longest. Today, the Dravidian languages are mostly found in South India. They're blue on the map. Some of the major ones are Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, and Telugu, anglicized pronunciations. Dravidian languages were originally spoken over a much wider area. We know this for two reasons. One is that we find little pockets of Dravidian languages all over the place. Like, there are a bunch around here, there's even one up in Pakistan. And secondly, various linguistic features in the North Indian languages, up here in yellow, are best explained through contact with Dravidian languages. Next, we come to the Munda languages. They're part of the Austroasiatic language family. Other members of this family you might have heard of include Khmer, aka Cambodian, and Vietnamese. They filtered into India from the east, and we don't really have a good date for when they arrived, but best guess is around 3,000 years ago. Santali is one of the more widely spoken Munda languages, with about 7.6 million speakers in India and adjacent countries. At this point, before I move on to the Indo-European languages, I'm going to note the existence of some other language families for the sake of completeness. There are some Tai-Kadai languages from the east. Those are related to Thai. There are some Sino-Tibetan languages up in the north. Those are related to Chinese and Tibetan. And there are some language isolates which are not related to anything else as far as we know. Next, we come to probably the biggest event in the linguistic history of the Indian subcontinent, the arrival of the Indo-Europeans. Indo-European is a huge family of languages that covers most of the languages in Europe. So we got English and French and Latin and Italian and German and the other Germanic languages and Russian and Czech and the other Slavic languages and Greek and Albanian. And the Indo-Iranian family of languages ended up crossing over the Hindu Kush mountains into Pakistan and on into India. So Pakistan got the Nuristani languages and the eastern edge of the Iranian languages, and India got Vedic Sanskrit. Vedic Sanskrit is the oldest form of Sanskrit. The arrival of Sanskrit in India probably goes back to around 1500 BCE, but again, it is really hard to pin down dates this far back. So at this point, I really wish I could go into the social and intellectual history of Sanskrit, because it is just amazing the degree to which India's intellectual history is all tied up in language and language use and synchronic language description, but I'm trying to keep this short, so we're gonna move on. So we see evidence of dialect variation even in our earliest Sanskrit texts, but it's clear that by around 500 BCE, the process had just run to completion and Sanskrit had broken up into a bunch of different languages. We call those the Middle Indic languages. These are your Prakrits, your Gandhari, your Magadhi, your Pali, bunch of other stuff. To give you a sense of time, these are the languages that would have been used by, say, the Buddha, a bunch of early Buddhist thinkers, Ashoka and the Maurya dynasty, that sort of thing. The Middle Indic languages eventually developed into the modern North Indian languages, of which there are a whole bunch. Not an exhaustive list. Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, Oriya, Bengali, huge number of Bengali speakers, Nepali. So, as an analogy for something you might be more familiar with, think of it as like Latin equals Sanskrit, Middle Indic equals early Romance, and then, Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, all the ones I just named are like, French, Italian, Why did I keep blanking on Spanish and Portuguese? Now let's back up a little to the start of Middle Indic. Even after the breakup of Sanskrit, Sanskrit continued to be used as a major language throughout India for administration or culture, or as a lingua franca, or as the major language of intellectual and religious life. It kept going like this, Sanskrit did, for a good 1,000 years. At least it did until the Mughal Empire came to India around 1500 CE. The folks running this empire were originally from Central Asia, but their main linguistic contribution to India was to switch the language of administration over from Sanskrit to Persian. Persian at the time was the big language of culture and sophistication in the Muslim world. The Mughal Empire was also ultimately responsible for the language of Urdu. Hindi and Urdu share a lot of the same basic vocabulary and grammar, but Hindi draws its educated vocabulary from Sanskrit, whereas Urdu draws it from Arabic and Persian. And of course, they use different writing systems. Hindi uses Devanagari like Sanskrit, and Urdu uses the Nastaliq script like Persian. Now, finally, wrapping up our linguistic history of India, we come to English. Yes, English! Did you know that English is a major language of India? You probably have some idea that the British were in control of India for a while, but here's how English became widespread. By the end of the 18th century, the British Raj was in control of most of India, and they eventually settled on English instead of Persian or Sanskrit as the language of schooling and administration. A lot of upwardly mobile Indian families had their children schooled in English because it opened up a lot of career opportunities. English became well established, not least because it served as a convenient lingua franca. Even now, nearly 75 years after independence, English is still one of the official languages of India. Which, brings us full circle. Because how did India develop this amazing linguistic diversity is only one half of the question. The other half is, why didn't it get obliterated by all the big empire builders that came through, like the Romans in Europe? And the answer seems to just be that the conquerors brought languages that sort of took over some of Sanskrit's function as a lingua franca. They were not replacing the languages that people were speaking at home. So thank you, India. You're amazing, and I'm sure this will not be the last video I make about your linguistic treasures. Alright, that was the show. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and I have a Twitter that is in the doobly-doo, along with further reading, and leave a comment. It's fun, I promise.